Chapter 24. The Heart of the Forest. An unpleasant reunion. Magic and darkness. It was early afternoon by now, at the very least. Although it was impossible to see the sun from the slums under the city, Link's instincts told him that it had by now certainly passed its zenith in the sky.
How much farther?
He asked irritably.
I swear we've passed this same alleyway 3 times by now. Almost there.
Navi chirped, bobbing along ahead of him. Link's eyes darted up and down the deserted street, wary of any possible threats attracted by copious amounts of light and noise produced by the over-enthusiastic fairy. Try as he might, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being followed. But he was certain nobody had seen him leave the castle. And although Zelda would certainly be aware of his absence by now, it would be nearly impossible to track him down within the vastness of Hyrule's depths. Then he recalled with a chill how quickly she had been able to find him when he had returned from Snow Peak. One could never be too cautious, he reassured himself.
Why do I get the feeling you're leading me in circles?
He asked as he climbed over a mountain of collapsed masonry.
The fountain is never in the same place, she said. You have to walk a specific path if you want it to appear. I think you're just lost,
he grumbled.
Nope. Here we are.
Here was a collapsed home. Literally, the only part of the structure still standing was the door frame.
Are you sure?
He said.
Just walk right through the door.
Link could see a thick layer of dust coating the ground on the other side of the door. An old wood-burning stove had toppled onto its side and was now being used as a den by a family of remlets. He glanced doubtfully back at Navi, and stepped through the door. Into the deepest, darkest part of the forest. The smell of damp earth and old trees was all around him, and the quiet blackness of the forest was illuminated gently by the light of hundreds of tiny fairies, flitting through the tangle of branches and leaves that was like a wall around the circular clearing in which he found himself. Before him was a pool of water, smoother than the finest glass. He stepped forward and looked into it. His face was reflected there, as were the many points of light that danced all around him. The water began to ripple, and rise, and a slender, beautiful body rose up out of the shining surface. The great fairy was a being of immense power, he sensed immediately, ancient and bound to the deepest heart of the wood.
Link, bearer of courage,
she greeted him. Her voice unnerved him somehow.
What brings you to my grove?
He removed his hat and bowed respectfully.
Great fairy. I come to seek your favor. And I shall grant it. But know that I will only bestow my blessing upon you once. You may ask but one favor, and then leave this place and never return. I know,
he said.
I just need you to answer a question for me.
Although the great fairy's quicksilver features did not change, he sensed a mild surprise.
If it is within my knowledge, I shall grant it.
He nodded, took a deep breath, and began.
The ruler of this city, Princess Zelda, is sick. Somehow, she has corrupted herself beyond all recognition. No blood flows in her veins, her skin is cold to the touch, and her heart does not beat. She is an unfeeling, uncaring person, so different from the Zelda I knew and loved once. I need to know what makes her this way. What has she done to herself, and how can I fix it?
The great fairy was silent.
That's all. That's my question.
She spoke.
I'm afraid I must send you away disappointed, hero. Oh.
He had been so sure that if he just knew the reason behind Zelda's dramatic change, he could begin to help her. Had he just wasted his request?
I can only give you a partial answer. I do not know why the Princess Zelda chooses to rule this city the way she does, nor why she cares so little for the welfare of its citizens, or the corruption that runs deep inside of it. But I can tell you what she has done to herself, the steps she has taken in her desire to become a god. I don't know if I want to hear this.
Navi tugged on Link's sleeve.
Maybe we should go. I have to know.
He pushed the fairy away.
Please, tell me.
The great fairy's shining eyes regarded him evenly.
Very well. The Princess Zelda is sustained by the power of the Triforce of Wisdom, a power that she has slowly corrupted beyond all recognition. Her physical body is not sustained by food, nor drink, nor breath, but by an ancient and dark magic that encompasses the entirety of Hyrule. She has, through centuries of magic, isolated the purest source of her power and imbued within it her very soul.
As the great fairy spoke, Link slowly began to realize the truth behind the magic circle he had found hidden within the castle. The circle had been but a fraction of something much larger, something as big as Hyrule itself.
The whole city?
He whispered.
Yes. Although its purpose is beyond my knowledge, she is using the Triforce to fuel powerful magic, the design of which is woven into the very city itself. The true heart of the spell is the Triforce, the sacred power made physical and turned into a reliquary for her soul. Somewhere within the city it sleeps, concealed away for centuries and guarded by her most powerful magic. If you wish to ever return Zelda to mortality, be it to slay her or to help her, you must break this spell.
She stopped speaking. The distant light began to fade, and slowly her sliver form began to trickle downwards toward the pool beneath her feet.
This is all that I can tell you, Link. Our counsel is at an end, your favor has been granted. Farewell. Wait.
He said.
How do I break the spell? Where do I go?
The last ebbings of her voice came to him on a gentle forest breeze.
This knowledge has already been provided to you.
The smell of dust, of damp stone and mildew. He was back in the Undercity once more.
I had better get back to the castle, he said. Maybe I can come up with some excuse for why I was gone. Follow me.
Navi said.
I'll guide you back the way we came.
Link was quite certain that he could find his way back to the castle perfectly fine on his own. The gigantic structure dominated the Hyrule sky and was pretty impossible to miss. But the fairy had already zipped off through the ruined streets.
Navi, where are you going?
He jogged after her, too tired to put up with her exuberance.
You can slow down, there's no rush.
He passed by an alley, one that he recognized. It was the same one he had passed 3 times earlier, when Navi had been leading him in circles on his way to the fountain. Something moved in the darkness there. At first he thought it was his eyes playing tricks on him, but then he realized it was the shadows themselves that were moving, and that the alleyway was dark, far far too dark. The blackness was almost complete. For a brief, horrific moment he thought that the Nameless had come for him. Then he realized the truth, as his own shadow rose up off the ground and tangled itself around his feet. He tripped and fell forward, but didn't hit the cobblestones. Instead he fell through a disorienting, inky darkness as gravity flipped around him and suddenly he was hanging upside down. Reflexively, he tried to shield his face from the fall that never came. He was grabbed roughly by the collar and flipped right side up, and before he could react there were massive hands clenching his throat, pinning him to the filthy brick wall. Cruel eyes and matted red hair leered at him out of the darkness, and the fingers slowly tightening around Link's throat were like bars of iron. Traitor, Ganondorf spat, and that one word was filled with hatred. His once proud features were twisted in rage, and his eyes seethed with the fury of 1,000 past lives. Link was staring into the face of the enemy that had hounded his very existence. This was not Ganondorf the revolutionary, but Ganon the Black King, terrible and unforgiving. Don't! Link tried to speak, but Ganondorf tightened his grip even more. Link tried in vain to pry his fingers loose, but the feeble effort was useless in the face of the Gerudo King's overwhelming strength. I'm sorry, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. Navi shouted, zipping back and forth anxiously. I'm so sorry, Link. They said they needed to see you, so I led you here, but I didn't know they were going to kill you. Please don't kill him, you said you wouldn't. A very familiar giggle echoed out of the shadows. Midna slinked into view behind Ganondorf. Link's been a very bad boy lately. King of Hyrule, are we? Moving up in the world. And all you had to do was sell out your loyal comrades. He tried to indicate that he didn't know what she was talking about, that he hadn't sold out anybody. His vision was starting to blur. I thought you were somebody special, Link, Midna said. Somebody I could believe in. You make me sick. Guys. Navi pleaded, frantically now as Link's struggles grew weaker.
Let him go, you're killing him, stop it.
Midna watched solemnly.
Are you going to kill him?
She asked mildly. For a moment, Link saw the fury and the hate in Ganondorf's eyes, and knew he was going to die. But the Gerudo King blinked once, twice, and then something changed within him. He shook his head and let Link fall to the dirty cobblestones.
No,
he said.
No, I'm not that man anymore.
Link coughed up spittle that was dark with blood, hacking and taking in great hoarse breaths that seared his neck. He was too weak to stand, too weak even to support himself with his hands and knees. He collapsed into a heap on the ground as his vision swam and faded in and out of darkness. His hand was draped over a massive shoulder, and Ganondorf slowly lifted him to his feet.
You still have a lot to answer for. Didn't?
His voice was a reedy whisper.
Don't know.
Midna swatted lazily at the fairy that was still hovering protectively over Link's head.
Way to almost blow our cover, Navi,
she said.
Leading him past here 3 times? We told you, bring him here after he talks to the Great Fairy. I'm sorry,
Navi apologized.
I was so nervous, and... Why did you have to hurt him? I thought you were friends. Friends don't leave friends to die in avalanches,
Midna said coldly.
That's like one of the first rules of friendship.
Ganondorf led him a little ways down the alley and sat him down on a convenient piece of rubble.
Drink this.
Link took the water gratefully and slowly sipped at it, massaging his bruised throat. Crouching down so that he was at eye level with Link, Ganondorf explained,
Nearly every single member of the Gerudo hidden in Hyrule has been murdered. Our hideouts have been looted and burned to the ground. Wasn't me,
Link said.
I didn't even know.
Couldn't have been. I don't know where the hideouts are. What about Vissen? Ganondorf shook his head.
I knew Vissen was the ex-commandant, I knew he was still reporting to Zelda. I never trusted him with that information. I swear. I didn't know. Would never.
Ganondorf cut him off with a wave of his hand.
No. Of course you wouldn't. I didn't think. I was hasty, it seems. But you have other things to answer for.
Navi landed on Link's shoulder and gently touched the deep bruises there. He felt her magic slowly begin its healing work, as breath came more easily to him.
As do you. You lied to me.
As he watched the magic take effect on Link, Ganondorf absent-mindedly rubbed his own neck. There was a significant scar there from the incident on the mountaintop.
Fair enough, I suppose. I'm sure you understand why I had to deceive you, although that is no excuse.
Link still didn't trust Ganondorf. He wasn't sure if he ever could.
We can talk about this another time. Right now.
He had to pause to cough and spit out the blood that had pooled in his mouth.
Right now, there are more important things to worry about. Like what?
Midna asked.
Zelda. I assume this is related to your meeting with the Great Fairy.
Ganondorf said. He nodded.
She's not right. I think we can help her, but first we have to. No,
Midna cut her off.
No helping. Zelda dies.
Ganondorf motioned for Link to continue.
I'm inclined to agree, but let's hear all the details first.
Link slowly recounted the story of his encounter with the Great Fairy, pausing frequently to take sips from Ganondorf's waterskin and massaging his throat. As Navi's magic began to take effect, however, his voice grew clearer and the pain faded to a dull ache. When he had finished, Ganondorf slumped onto the stone beside him and lowered his face into his hands.
The whole city,
he whispered.
Zelda designed every aspect of Hyrule herself. She drew the peoples of Hyrule close to her and built this prison for them. And it's been happening for centuries. That's Twilight magic,
Midna said. They both turned to look at her. She twirled a strand of fiery hair around her finger thoughtfully.
Not the city thing. But the magically binding a part of yourself to an object thing? It's an ancient ritual of our people. Why do they do it?
Ganondorf asked.
What's it for? It's tough to explain. The concept is that you remove a part of your soul from your body, tempering your emotions and focusing your thoughts. The removed part of yourself sits in this object. It has to be something magical, something powerful, and acts as an amplification for your magic. It's like, you know how a lens will focus sunlight into a beam? Twilight priests used reliquaries to hone their minds and attain enlightenment. What did you call them?
Link interrupted her. She rolled her eyes.
Reliquaries. An object that contains a part of yourself is a reliquary for your soul. It's old, lost magic. Why the only other people who've done it are,
Ganondorf was paying very close attention now.
Zant. Yeah. That helmet he's always wearing. And also, kind of. Me.
Link did a double take.
Wait, you did this?
She scoffed.
Yeah, genius. Remember my hat?
She waved a hand over her head, outlining the shape of the strange helm she used to wear.
So that's why you changed. Your reliquary was destroyed. Right. It's extremely powerful magic. The spell changes you, inside and out. It drove Zant insane, and it trapped me in that imp form.
She coughed awkwardly.
Most Twilight kept their reliquary on their person at all times, in order to produce the most refined form of the enchantment. I can't even imagine how powerful someone would have to be to use their reliquary to fuel magic on a scale like you've described. It probably helps that her reliquary is one of the most powerful magic artifacts to ever exist,
Link added. They contemplated this silently for a few moments. Ganondorf broke the tension.
This information is valuable. We need to plan our next move. I hope we can do that planning over a couple drinks,
Midna said,
because I sure need one. I second that.
Link lifted himself painfully from the dusty rock.
We'll go to Telma's,
Ganondorf decided.
With Gerudo being hunted down all over the city, it might be a good idea to suggest she go into hiding. She's always been one of our more overt supporters.
Link briefly debated returning to the castle, as he wasn't exactly feeling too happy about the circumstances of his reunion with Ganondorf and Midna. It really was a choice between the lesser of two evils.
Fine. Let's go to Telma's.
He stood up and followed them. They made their way along the gloomy avenues of the Undercity, navigating the abandoned streets with ease as Navi floated along behind them. Telma's bar was close to the western gate, and only a short walk away along Thunderhead Road, a long street that rose along the circumference of the city walls, all the way through the lower levels of the Hyrule up into the wealthy Dragon Roost quarter.
So who's been carrying out these attacks? Are the soldiers raiding Gerudo hideouts?
Link asked.
No, that would be too obvious. It would turn the population of Hyrule against them.
Ganondorf said.
There's a dark sorceress named Varen who leads a gang of thugs. She's been hunting down Gerudo. Varen's been in Zelda's pocket for years.
Link thought back to the conversation he had had with Vissen. About how deeply the corruption in Hyrule ran.
She has to know that you're here. She'll find us.
Midna gave him an incredulous look.
Are you kidding? Nobody, and I mean nobody, is better than laying low than me or the big G here. I agree that Telma's is a bit of an obvious hiding spot,
Ganondorf acquiesced.
As soon as we make sure she's safe, we work out our next move and disappear for a while. When I came back to the Hyrule a few days ago, she tracked me down in less than half an hour,
Link said.
We know the city is shaped according to her will, and that her magic runs through it. As long as we're in Hyrule, we're playing on her turf.
They were close to Skyview Street, the main thoroughfare that led out the western gates, and the streets were full of travelers, merchants, pilgrims, and thieves hurrying back and forth. It was the middle of the afternoon, the busiest time of the day. The sun shone brightly overhead and the city walls loomed large just a few hundred meters away.
Let's hurry up,
Ganondorf said.
We need to work out a plan and get moving before nightfall. I don't suppose we could risk moving at night?
Midna asked.
It's one thing she'd never expect.
Ganondorf shook his head.
Still not worth the risk. We'll get Telma into hiding, and then find a good location in the Undercity. It's enough of a maze down there that we could hide for.
He trailed off, slack-jawed.
Ganondorf.
Midna waved her hand in front of his face.
Hey, what's up? Anybody home? Link, you seeing this?
She turned to Link, who was also standing obliviously in the middle of the busy street, staring down at his feet.
You guys are creeping me out.
The city shook, ever so slightly, and Navi caught on to the fact that something was happening.
Hey!
She shouted, right into Midna's ear.
Something is happening.
The foundations of Hyrule trembled again, and this time people all around them were catching on to the faint tremors and the persistent thrum of magic deep below their feet.
Goddesses!
Ganondorf whispered.
What is she doing? She knows you're here,
Link said. Midna was fed up.
What the hell are you two talking about?
Light erupted from the ground, golden and blinding, beams of it shooting up into the sky from all over the city. For a brief moment, the streets themselves were luminescent as grand patterns traced themselves in light all throughout Hyrule. It was the magic circle that Link had found inside the castle, on a much, much larger scale. Zelda had triggered the spell that enveloped all of Hyrule. A wall of light rose from the western sky. As the panicked populace looked frantically around them, the shimmering pane expanded until it encircled the entirety of the city, sealing off Hyrule completely from the outside world. The magical barrier closed far above them, blocking the sky and replacing it with a ceiling of gold. Within the span of a minute, the entire city had been encased within a giant dome of magic.
She doesn't want us going anywhere,
Link commented. People were emptying their homes to stand in the street and look on in awe. The general atmosphere was one of fear and confusion. Ganondorf began shunting people roughly aside as he hurried toward Telma's.
Let's get off the streets,
he said.
I have a feeling things are about to go from bad to worse. How could things get worse?
Midna asked. And then she said, oh. As things began to get worse. The light cast by Zelda's magic began to fade, and the barrier itself began to fade slowly into opacity. Already, the sun's light was filtered into a gentle orange haze, reminiscent of twilight, and was gradually growing fainter and fainter. Link began to shove his way hurriedly through the crowd. Telma's bar was just around the corner, and he had a feeling that all hell would break loose once people began to catch on to what was happening.
It's getting darker.
Someone shouted.
The sun's going out. Get inside, get inside.
Chaos broke out in a matter of seconds. People began to rush into the nearest buildings and slam the doors. Suddenly displaced homeowners drew weapons and attempted to force their way back inside their domiciles, only to be met with violent resistance from the impromptu squatters. Fighting broke out almost immediately as, all over Hyrule, the crowds of people that had flooded the streets all at once began to hurry inside and bar the doors.
Gods damn it,
Link drew the Master's sword. He had lost sight of Ganondorf and Midna, but was able to keep the facade of Telma's bar straight ahead of him. He hurried towards the familiar establishment, fighting the throng of citizens desperate for any kind of shelter. Light continued to fade. The streets were growing very dark, very fast.
Over here!
Ganondorf bellowed, and Link pushed towards the booming voice. The entire city had begun to cry out in terror, and panicked screams echoed all around him.
Move!
He bellowed, clanging the Master's sword against his shield and whirling it over his head. The tactic granted him the briefest of openings as the crowd pushed back, away from the gleaming blade. Link barreled forward, using his shield to knock people aside. He heard more shouts and the sounds of violence behind him, but did not alter his gaze from the door in front of him. It was much like his first night in the city. The door to Telma's was swung wide open, golden light spilling out into the deepening darkness. Ganondorf stood in the doorframe, pushing away the violent crowd. Someone slammed into him from behind, arms wrapping around his already tender neck. Red hair spilled across his vision.
Hick! Oh, right, the neck. Sorry.
Midna eased her grip.
Listen, I'll clear a path, just run.
Clearing a path turned out to be a gout of flames, once again shocking the crowd just enough to give Link an opening. He put his head down and charged through, Midna still clinging to him.
Inside, go.
Ganondorf shifted just enough to let them in, and as soon as they were across the threshold slammed the door shut.
A table, get a table.
He shouted. The patrons inside the bar were as frantic as the crowd outside, arming themselves with chair legs and broken bottles and pushing back the people trying to climb in through the shattered windows. Link flipped one of the tables over and slid it across the floor, where Ganondorf jammed it underneath the door handle.
Get to the windows upstairs, you damn fools!
Telma was yelling.
Groose, for the goddess's sake, where are those nails?
A burly, red-headed youth bounded up from the cellar and threw a jar of nails at Telma, who promptly began to nail boards over the windows.
Easy, Granny, I got everything under control. Call me Granny one more time, and I'll throw you out of here.
Groose paled.
Granny, you wouldn't.
Telma sighed.
Just help, would you?
Using planks of wood torn from the bar, the floor, and the tables, they boarded up every window and door of Telma's bar, doing their best to shut out the pleading of those still trapped outside. Midna dashed back and forth, casting protective spells over each one of the improvised barricades.
Ganondorf,
Link said,
we can't just leave those people.
Ganondorf gritted his teeth and resumed nailing the door shut.
That beast will be coming straight for us. If it gets inside these doors, everybody in here is dead. We can do nothing for the people trapped out in the streets, but we can save ourselves, and we can save everybody in this bar.
Outside, the artificial night had completely enveloped the city. Screams of an entirely different kind were beginning to echo from somewhere in the Undercity, and not too far away.
If it's coming for us, we can't be here,
Link said.
We're putting all these people's lives at risk. I know.
Ganondorf took a step back and admired their handiwork. A lot of elbow grease and a little bit of magic had resulted in sturdy fortifications that were layered with minor banishing wards, ensuring that they would have plenty of advance notice should anything try to break in.
But running out there now without a plan would be suicide. We need to think carefully about our next course of action. I think I know what step 1 is.
Midna had been listening in on their conversation. She raised a hand.
Telma. How does a round of whiskey sound?
Telma leaned wearily on what was left of the bar.
Sounds heavenly. Don't mix it with anything,
Link asked.
Not a chance, kiddo.
She pulled a bottle from beneath the counter and took a long pull.
Not a damn chance.
Midna helped herself from the selection on the wall behind Telma.
First good idea Link's had since the day I met him.
She drank deeply, and then handed the bottle off to Groose.
So. Zelda, hey? Damned bitch.
She spat.
Cowardly whore, that's all she is. She's no fool.
Ganondorf picked up a dusty glass tumbler from where it had rolled during the commotion and poured himself 3 fingers of Telma's finest.
Zelda wants us to act rashly. To make a mistake. This is intended to goad us into reckless action. She knows that the 3 of us together are a likely match for her.
The 3 of them sat on the floor in front of the boarded-up door, speaking under their breath.
She probably knows that we're aware of her secret,
Link said.
I think this might be more of a reactionary measure than you think, Ganondorf. We know how to harm her, now, and she can't be comfortable with that. You're saying she's scared?
Midna's eyebrows rose into the red curls of her hair.
I don't know,
Link said.
I don't know if she can even feel fear. But look at it this way. Us knowing her secret is probably the first thing in a very, very long time that she hasn't planned for. So we have to act fast,
Ganondorf said.
Leaving the city is impossible. I think it's pretty evident that our first priority needs to be breaking the spell over Hyrule. Do you know for certain where Zelda's Reliquary will be?
Link, fortunately, was still carrying the compass that the mask salesman had given to him.
This led me to the circle she's got hidden up in the castle. I'm pretty sure that it will guide us to the center of the larger spell, if we follow it.
He turned it on its side, and the needle pointed almost straight down.
It must be in the Undercity,
Midna said.
I bet that's why she created the Nameless, to keep anybody from ever venturing down there. You're more familiar with this magic than either of us,
Ganondorf said.
Would her reliquary be at the center of the enchantment?
Midna twirled her hair between her fingers absent-mindedly.
It would have to be. The reliquary acts as a focal point for the spellcaster's energy, and there's another thing.
The tone of her voice did not bode well.
What's that?
Asked Link.
What we've seen today is probably not the full power of the enchantment. I don't know what she's trying to do, but if she gets her hands on the entire Triforce, the amount of power she can channel through these runes would be amplified 1,000-fold. She already thinks she's a god,
Link said,
but with the complete Triforce, she will be.
Ganondorf tapped his hands on the table, thinking. He came to a decision.
Very well. We cannot afford to sit idle. Also, I think it would be best if we were to split up, and hopefully divide Zelda's efforts to pursue us.
Link shared an uncertain glance with Midna.
Split up? Where would we go? Beneath the city there are Goron mines that tunnel into the rock. I made it the emergency refuge for any Gerudo members should the worst come to pass, and it has. I say that we head down there and rendezvous with any survivors, and then we'll hunt down this reliquary that's keeping Zelda alive.
They continued to drink, and Ganondorf explained the routes they would each take to the Gerudo's last resort hideaway. The sounds of panic coming from the streets outside had faded into an ominous silence.
No point in delaying the inevitable,
Ganondorf sighed.
It's important we get moving right away. I'll leave now. Make sure to give me plenty of time to get away from here before the next one of you follows. An hour or two should do.
They stood up and began prying the boards off of the doorframe.
Hey,
said Groose, the burly young man who had helped them barricade the door in the first place.
What are you doing that for? Leaving,
Ganondorf said, and he left it at that.
If you take down the barricades, that monster will get in here. Board it up again once we're gone,
Ganondorf shrugged.
It makes no difference. We won't be coming back. But these boards were to keep those people out, they're little more than an inconvenience to the beast that dwells in the darkness.
Almost as an afterthought, he stopped.
Navi,
he said,
go with Midna. Make sure she doesn't do anything stupid.
Link had almost forgotten about the tiny fairy, but she was still flitting aimlessly about over their heads.
Sure thing. Don't worry, Midna, I've got your back. Why are you doing this to me?
Midna complained. Ganondorf tossed aside the last fragment of wood, took another pull from the bottle of whiskey, and bid them farewell.
See you two in a few hours. Telma. Thank you for your hospitality. Goodbye. Gods help you,
Telma said. And then he was gone. The door still hung open and through its frame Link could make out the hulking figure of Ganondorf fading into the darkness. He glanced up and down the street, drew the hood of his cloak over his face, and broke into a light jog, disappearing from Link's vision.
Close that goddamn door,
Midna said.
The shadows out there are more than just the absence of light.
Link closed the door. Then he drew up a chair and sat down in front of it, sliding the Master Sword from his back and placing it on his lap.
Groose,
he said.
Yeah? What is it? I'm going to watch this door for a few hours, but then I'll need to leave. Do you have a blade?
Groose took a moment to adjust his hair.
I sure do. It's upstairs, with my things. I call it, Groose Caliba. And I give you my word that I shall use it to defend this bar to the death.
The solemnity of the vow was broken by Midna.
You can't name your sword after yourself. But it's traditional to give the swords of great heroes legendary names. Great hero? What's so great about you?
Winking, he struck a pose and flexed as hard as he could. Link interrupted the bizarre exchange.
Listen, you don't need to go on about defending this place to the death. I just want to make sure there's someone here to stand guard once I'm gone.
Groose deflated a little bit, seemingly disappointed that he wouldn't be getting the chance to make a heroic last stand.
Oh. Well, no problem, buddy. I saw a couple Gorons in the corner of the place too, I'm sure they're pretty strong. I'll ask them to lend a hand.
The next hour or so passed in apprehensive silence, save for a few quiet sentences exchanged between Link and Midna as they sat in front of the door. Finally, it came time for Midna to leave.
Well,
she began, before trailing off.
Be careful,
Link said.
I'll see you in a bit.
She smiled grimly.
Yeah. You watch yourself, too. Bye, Link.
Navi said. She was tucked into one of the pockets on Midna's cloak so that her luminescence wouldn't attract attention.
Gimme that bottle, I'm taking it with me.
She snatched up the half-empty bottle of whiskey.
Drinking too much is bad for you.
Navi chirruped from her pocket. Midna stepped out into the night, closing the door behind her. Link heard her speaking under her breath.
Okay, if you're going to be riding along on this trip, you are going to have to be quiet.
And then she was gone.
Saving Hyrule, hey,
said Groose, from behind him. He had retrieved his sword, a well-used bastard sword, the haft stained with sweat. Link took the blade from him and examined it, testing the edge.
A fine weapon,
he pronounced. The sword was too heavy for his liking, although he supposed that it would suit a larger man like Groose just fine.
You know, I used to dream of going on adventures and saving the world,
Groose said wistfully.
Of being a hero that would slay the nameless, lead a rebellion, maybe rescue a fair damsel. But now I see guys like you, and Ganondorf, and that angry chick you hang out with, and I realize maybe I'm not cut out for that stuff. Sometimes I wonder if I'm cut out for it, too,
Link said.
But somebody has to act, if only for the sake of people who can't. See, that's what I'm talking about. I just wanted to be famous. But then I realized, I have friends.
He made a sweeping gesture with his hands, at Telma, at an old woman hunched tiredly over a table, at a pair of Gorons, at all the haggard patrons who had been thrown together into this mess simply by the coincidence of being in Telma's bar when the sky went dark.
And it's all I can do just to make sure they don't get hurt. And I might not even succeed at that. So, I guess what I'm saying is, that I respect what you do, man.
Link wasn't too sure how Groose expected him to respond.
Thanks. I guess. Hey, if we manage to get this whole mess straightened out, we might need a few extra hands in our gang. The Gerudo, right?
Groose nodded thoughtfully.
Actually, I was thinking of starting my own vigilante group. What do you think is a better name? Groose's Avengers, or the Groose Team?
Link smirked and shook his head.
I think maybe you should concentrate on protecting the people in here for now. Yeah. That's what I figured.
Link waited a bit longer, until finally he grew too impatient to sit anymore.
I'm leaving. See you around,
he said, grasping Groose's hand in a firm handshake.
Be careful,
Telma said. Link nodded.
Goodbye. Hopefully I'll see you again.
And with that glib comment he stepped outside, into the darkness without a dawn, and set off down the street. The faint light of Telma's bar faded behind him, and then he turned a corner, and it was gone. Alone on the streets of Hyrule, Link took the first steps on his long journey downwards into its darkest depths. Chapter end.